My security clearance was upgraded to cosmic top secret, which was then and still is today the highest level of security classification that NATO has. I had to have a cosmic top secret clearance to work in SHARC, Supreme Headquarters Operations Center, the War Room. I was a senior master sergeant at the time, and when I was assigned in SHARC, I was given the job of maintaining the duty roster. We worked on a 24-hour basis, day after day after day. And I was given the job of running the duty rosters, and I worked in SHARC. And back in those days, let me tell you, the war rooms were somewhat primitive. You've seen pictures today, I'm sure, of the control centers of most major installations like SAC in Colorado Springs. Everything is electronic. Everything is demonstrated on the wall, extensions just like this beautiful stuff here. Back in those days, we had teletype, we had field telephones, and if we wanted something on the display, we had to go up and take a pin and put it on the wall and show controllers where this division was, where that Soviet regiment was, and so on and so on. Very primitive. When I arrived in the summer of 1963, I heard rumors about a study that was underway. Now, it interested me because the study was about UFOs. And I was intrigued by that possibility. I was curious about UFOs. I had no idea then what they were, what they represented. But we used to discuss this in SHARC, in the war room. The study was underway. What was it about? What happened? Well, it appears that on the morning of the 2nd of February, 1961, World War III almost began. And it was involved in the flyover of large numbers of circular metallic craft, flying in formations, very obviously under intelligent control. And they would fly out of the Soviet sector in the Warsaw Pact toward the west, in formation, at a high rate of speed, and at a very high altitude. And they would turn north over the English Channel, over the southern coast of England, and then they would disappear off of NATO radar over the Norwegian Sea. On that morning of 2nd February 1961, World War III almost began. The Soviets went on red alert. The NATO forces went on red alert. Everybody was, fingers on their triggers, thumbs poised above those red buttons. And World War III was just moments away. Within 20 minutes, it was all over. The objects flew, turned north, disappeared off radar. It was all over. After this event occurred, a British Air Marshal by the name of Sir Thomas Pike, who was a Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe at that time. He was the deputy to my boss, General Lyman Lendisser, an American four-star general who was known as SACEUR, Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. Air Marshal Pike says, "I've had enough of this. These objects have been showing up regularly from time to time. As I said, they almost triggered a war." Air Marshal Pike said, "We're going to have to come to terms and find out what the hell's going on here. I want to know." So he began a study. He initiated a study in SHAPE headquarters that was to last 3 years. They published it and they issued it in the summer of 1964 while I was there working in the war room. They titled it An Assessment, an evaluation of a possible military threat to Allied forces in Europe. So it had from a title, just couldn't learn very much about that. An assessment, an evaluation of a possible military threat to Allied forces in Europe. I was working in the war room one early morning around 2 or 3 o'clock, and as I jokingly used to refer to it, the coffee was too black to drink. We read all the newspapers, magazines. Many of you have heard military life is about 99% boredom, broken up with 1% of sheer terror. And that's the way it used to be, and that's the way it probably is used today. I'm sitting there nodding off, and this American Air Force full colonel looked at me and he says, "Wake up." He went over to the vault. The vault, the shop, was a walk-in safe. We opened the door and walked in, and we kept classified documents in there. The colonel went over to the vault, the file, and pulled out this document and threw it on my desk, and he says, "Read that, that'll wake you up." Ladies and gentlemen, my life changed. I opened the first page and I couldn't put it down. I read and read and read, and I read it every time I was on duty in the war room. I was shocked, I was stunned by the implications of what I read in that study. And as I said, my life has never been ever quite the same. The study, briefly, and I have to briefly lay this out. I could talk for 2 hours about this, but the study simply concluded this.